Ladies and gentlemen, this is Elden Ring's lore explained by the channel VaatiVidya. Okay. This channel is really big when it comes to Dark Souls games lore, I guess. Bloodborne, Dark Souls, right? Elden Ring here. Elden Ring basically the big game of this year, possibly, right? I don't think there's any other contender. Right, I know there's another few good games there, but nowhere near close how good Elden Ring was. But yeah, this is so funny because I played Dark Souls, only first one, right? I never played any other game from this developer until Elden Ring, obviously. But I didn't even know Dark Souls had any lore or story to it, but apparently it did, and so does Elden Ring. Even I only kind of played a bit of Elden Ring at the start. I've never finished it even today. I don't know. I'm just trying to find a time where I can play a game for 4 or 5 hours straight if I want to enjoy this. I can play for 20 minutes and enjoy this. So yeah, I'm putting it on hold. I don't want to ruin this by playing a small here and there. But yeah, apparently this games like this has lore, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting. This video should have even more. It's already 6 million views, but videos like this should have like 30-40 million views because I'm sure most people don't even know that the games like this has some kind of a lore. So let's watch it.
Our story doesn't begin in the lands between. It begins in the cosmos, far away, with an outer god called the Greater Will. There are a lot of outer gods mentioned in Elden Ring. You can think of these kind of like the great ones of Bloodborne. They're distant beings, they're all-powerful, and they're quite unknowable by design. But many of these outer gods want to make their presence felt in the world. The Greater Will maybe most of all.
I guess the fundamental gods, basically gods that, existed forever, existed before the creation of the world or something like that. The main gods, something like that. Right? Like how in Greek law there's Uranus, things like that, right?
To this end, it sent a golden star hurtling towards the lands between. The Elden Star's incantation tells us that this golden star was bearing a beast, an Elden beast. The Elden Remembrance calls it a vassal beast of the Greater Will. If you didn't know, a vassal is someone who holds land on behalf of their overlord. Obviously, this is fitting in this case, because the Elden Beast occupied the lands between on behalf of the Greater Will, and was a living incarnation of the concept of order. As such, this beast would later become the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring itself is made up of runes of power, some great, some small, that together represent a sort of logic for the world to follow. Thus, the Elden Ring represents order. The true nature of this order is a subject of constant debate and research undergone by fundamentalists. But 2 of the key fundamentals are the laws of causality and regression. You can think of the law of causality as cause and effect, where actions have consequences, and those consequences are new causes that branch out into infinity. These are the relationships between things. Then there's the law of regression that states that all things eternally yearn to converge and return to their roots. Fittingly, then, the Elden Ring is housed within the Erd Tree, which towers over the lands between. But it's very important to stress that life in the lands between did not begin with the Erd Tree, the Elden Ring, or the Elden Beast. No, the lands between were occupied well before the Greater Will came. There were other beings here. There were other factions here. There were other gods here. And there was even another great tree here before the Erd Tree. And this is where a huge twist regarding the Erd Tree comes in. So, there are incantations in the game called aspects of the Crucible. According to their descriptions, these are manifestations of the Erd Tree's primal vital energies. And I quote, "They are an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together." But how could all life be blended together in the Erd Tree if the Erd Tree appeared after life existed? Well, there can only be one answer, right? That the Erd Tree is a parasite, and it took over a tree that existed here before. This ancient tree was called the Great Tree. So the Great Tree was almost certainly the location of this primordial crucible, and it must have been a very powerful primordial force for the Greater Will to have commandeered. It might even be the reason the Lands Between is important to the Greater Will in the first place. It also explains why spells and enemies related to the Great Tree's Crucible would eventually be looked down upon. For example, the Knot Talisman is fashioned from a knotted vestige of the Crucible, and it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. Enemies related to the Crucible are the Omen, the Misbegotten, and the Crucible Knights, and all three of them would be shunned, enslaved, or imprisoned. Those who speak for the Erd Tree don't want you to know its roots, so to speak.
Alright. Man, I like this. The lore starts as certain fundamental things, right? Like rings are supposed to be something like threads of the actual reality, right? That balances the reality in a way, right? That is so important to balance things out in the world, right? So we are talking about the fundamental levels here, like how world works basically, right? And how, just how best there were even older gods, right? So adding that kind of element to it, lots of fictional world has this element, right? There were even ancient beings, right? They were even more powerful, this and that. So that's also an element into this. But so far, thing I'm seeing that in this game, I don't know about other games like Bloodborne or something, but in this Elden Ring particular, we are talking about very fundamentals. Like we're talking about really old gods. We're talking about things like the rings, that is literal fundamentals of how world works, how it balances things out. So yeah, I like that. Like it feels kind of like how God of War is, right? Playing in the battlefield of the gods, right? Battling the gods rather than playing some small role.
Speak. According to the spell, Protection of the Erd Tree, in the beginning everything was in opposition to the Erd Tree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order.
In Marika's own words, the Erd Tree governs all. The choice is thine. Become one with the order, or divest thyself of it, to wallow at the fringes, a powerless upstart.
But the Greater Will needed more than a big tree. It needed loyal agents in the Lands Between. To this end, it has the Two Fingers, who are its envoys. The Two Fingers heirloom has a weird picture of them, but it reads, "Of course, fingers cannot speak, yet these are eloquent. Persistently they wriggle, spelling out mysteries in the air. Thus did we gain the words of our faith." These words are interpreted by the finger readers. These are the undying old crones that you would have found throughout the Lands Between. They pass down the wisdom of the Two Fingers, or at least they used to.
Your fingers, please, your fingers. I can read them.
Most of them appear to have lost their purpose, and they're desperate to read your fingers and tell you annoying riddles, since their two fingers are likely dead. And yes, of course, there are multiple sets of Two Fingers. You would have found their corpses on the tops of the divine towers. Atop these towers, you loot the fingers in order to activate the true power of a great rune. Specifically though, you are giving benediction back to your great rune. You're taking a blessing back from the two dead fingers, essentially. This is just one of many blessings that the Two Fingers can bestow, and my point is kind of that the Two Fingers clearly have more than just influence. They have real power on some level. The Greater Will needs these powerful envoys and agents because, while it's obviously incredibly powerful, it does seem limited by a few things. First is space. The Greater Will didn't come to the Lands Between itself, it sent an Elden beast to do its bidding instead. Second is time. There is a moment later in the game where your pair of Two Fingers go still because they're forced to commune with the Greater Will for guidance.
When they are finished, the fingers will again offer their guidance. But thousands, if not tens of thousands, of moons must first pass. No matter for me. But you, how will you ever manage to wait?
So the Greater Will needs a physical manifestation of order. It needs envoys to convey its will, but what it also needs is a god. Introducing Marika the Eternal. I have this utterly enormous mind map of Elden Ring's lore, and there's a reason she's at the center. She's essentially the equivalent of Gwyn from Dark Souls, except Unlike Gwyn, Marika didn't just crawl out of the dark and find power. To an extent, it seems like she earned it. We don't know much about her origins, except that she is of the Numen race, which is actually an origin that you can choose in the character selection screen. Numen come from outside the lands between, and are supposed descendants of denizens of another world, long-lived but seldom born. At some point, Marika was chosen as an Empyrean. What is an Empyrean? Well, an Empyrean is a being chosen by the Fingers as a candidate for godhood. As an Empyrean, Marika received the aid of a shadow to do her bidding. So what is a shadow? Well, it's a wolf, shadow-bound to its Empyrean by the two Fingers. Lunar Princess Rani is another example of an Empyrean with a shadow-bound beast. You would have met Blythe. These creatures are the Empyrean's very own shadow. They are completely loyal to their needs and, by definition, incapable of treachery. Marika's shadow was a beast called Malakath. Every Empyrean uses their shadow in different ways, but Marika's sole need of her shadow was as a vessel to lock away destined death. So what is destined death? Well, according to Enya, it's the rune of death.
The rune of death goes by two names. The other is destined death.
We mentioned earlier that the Elden Ring is made up of runes, and at some point, maybe when she was chosen as a god, Marika plucked the rune of death from the Elden Ring. She gave the rune of death to Malakath, her totally loyal shadow, who bore a black blade imbued with this rune. It's kind of genius, really. In a single act, she removed the concept of death from the lands between, while also commanding total control of death through her shadow, who could deliver it at her whim.
Okay, damn.
Now, some of you might be asking, if death is removed from the lands between, how come I can kill this dog? First off, shame on you. Second, from a lore point of view, that dog isn't really dead. It's simply in the process of its spirit, or its soul, returning to the Erd Tree. Catacomb dungeons, for example, are specifically constructed near the roots of the Great Tree for this reason, so that the Erd Tree can reabsorb their ashes back into it. This process replaced the concept of a death that you were destined to have, but this random spirit outside of a catacomb dungeon says it best. As another example of this theory, when you kill a major boss, you receive a remembrance of them. These are spirits, and they are hewn into the Erd Tree. In this way, thanks to the Erd Tree's grace, their spirits are immortalized, in a sense. This new form of death also explains what's happening when you...
Ooh, I like that. I like that whole element, right? And things never really die, because basically she just was a bit clever and just immortalized, I guess, the place. She just bound the death like that from the Elden Ring. Damn, this is incredible. So basically, obviously, this is a game, right? They can't let things be immortal. What you gonna kill? So yeah, they just added this element. Like they go back to the the roots, basically, to the tree. Whoever dies, the spirit who's kind of like immortal and things like that.
Summon spirits
from ash and return to the Erd Tree.
However, some spirits never return to the Erd Tree, and they rise within death as corpses or skeletons instead.
Yeah.
So this was the new order, and it's important to stress that it was in this moment, when the rune of death was removed, when destined death was taken, this is when order became the Golden Order.
The forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation.
Specifically, this was Marika's Golden Order. So not only did she become a god and a vessel for the Elden Ring, she became renowned as Marika the Eternal for her removal of destined death. It was a huge part of her character and her reign as well. However, Marika had more than just death to conquer. She had wars to fight, as the world was occupied by many forces that could threaten her Golden Order. There was war with the Storm Lord, who likely ruled over Stormvale, and there was a war with the Giants, who were masters of a flame that could burn the Erd Tree. There was war with the ancient dragons, who incidentally had stones that could twist time and thus slay a god. And finally, there was war brewing with the Carrion royalty, who had previously obeyed laws which contravened the Golden Order. Thus, sort of similar to how the Greater Will needed an Empyrean to enforce its will, Marika herself needed someone to wage war. So, there was to be a husband, a consort, an Elden Lord. The man chosen was Hoarah, a ferocious warrior who became known as the Lord of the Battlefield. His crown was warranted with strength, and while it was for this...
I like how things are, slowly attaching like that. So she basically, obviously, bound death like that. So, nothing dies. It created this, golden, whatever he said that. But obviously there are going to be creatures that's going to have godly powers as well, like dragons and shit. So, yeah, this is epic. I mean, will we get some kind of a game, I don't know, not DLC, like other Elden Ring game where we witness that time? Right, where you fight guards like that, guard powers like dragons and shit, like he said, the lore here. Because I'm pretty sure that would be prequel, right? That shit already happened while we play this game, and she's gonna have a Elden Lord husband, whatever, who's actually will be needed to fight wars and shit like that. Aren't we the character? If I remember correctly, aren't we the one who's the Elden Lord? We can be Elden Lord. I don't remember that exactly.
Strength that Marika married him, he was also required to take a vow to conduct himself as a lord. To suppress the ceaseless lust for battle that raged within, Hoarah took the beast regent Sarosh upon his back. You'll notice this is another example of a beast being given for the purpose of serving order. Thus, in this moment, he went from being Hoarah, warrior, to Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, consort to Queen Marika, and a certified demigod. Godfrey and Marika had 3 demigod children together. There was Godwyn the Golden, who you saw being killed in the opening trailer, and there were also the reviled Omen twins, Morgoth, who guards the Erd Tree, and Mohg, who became Lord of Blood. You might think that Godric was another demigod child, but he actually wasn't. Instead, he was probably descended from Godwyn. Anyway, we'll talk about the demigods more in detail in another video, so subscribe for that. But for now, just know that Godfrey and his offspring were the first demigods, henceforth known as the Golden Lineage. In his wars, Godfrey led his 16 Crucible Knights into battle, who were named so for they fought with the primordial powers of the Erd Tree. Their incantations were aspects of the Crucible itself, and they likely fought giants, dragons, the Storm Lord, and more to usher in their age. The age of the Erd Tree.
In Marika's own words, "Hark, brave warriors. Hark, my Lord Godfrey. We commend your deeds. Guidance hath delivered ye through each ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring, for the age of the Erd Tree."
The Erd Tree would go on to be largely seen as a blessing for all of those in the lands between.
Alright, so let's recap a bit. First of all, there are such thing as this kind of a greater outer worlds, not outer beings, great or whatever they're called, right? These are the, out of the world big beings, like I said before, like how there are, every lore has their fundamental gods, like how Greeks are Uranus, things like that, right? The gods, these are the gods. They send some beast towards the land in between. That's the land where where everything is basically, and basically the Elden Ring, right? And this Elden Ring had powers. We are talking about fundamentals here, right? So like how we have physical laws of our world, this ring had laws in it, which kind of represent order. So, things like cause and effect, things like that. So one was cause and effect, basically you do something, action has consequences, things like that. And the second one was basically that everything goes back to its root, creating this kind of a cycle of life kind of element. I like this thing, like, we're talking about the lore, right, deep. So we're talking about the fundamentals of things. So this is great. And these gods basically needed a communication thing with this is the two fingers, right? So yeah, eventually what was her, Marika, or I forgot her name, I don't know, I'm not good with names. C kind of came along and bind this death basically in a way, right? Took it out of equation, so nobody really dies. So everybody just goes back to the tree, right? So there are different elements to it. Certain people don't want to go back to the tree, so they are like this zombie type of decaying dead things walking around, and those who goes back to the tree, their spirit lives on, things like that. So people are kind of immortal in that way, and this created this kind of a whole chain line. She had a husband, this guy was more like waging war and things like that. They had children, right, which are kind of like demigods. Damn, I like this lore basically that is branching out here slowly. I do remember somebody telling me somewhere that we are the Elden Lord, or we can be Elden Lord in the end. I don't know, but yeah, this is going to be interesting.
Those close to it in Leyndell, the capital city of the Erd Tree, the tree bestowed blessings. For example, the dew that dropped from its branches were like jewels. It loomed overhead as a constant reminder of order, and its roots reached far and wide, relieving many of the burden of death. In fact, Erd Tree burial was one of the highest honors a hero could receive. One by one, the previous factions of the world fell. The giants were put to the sword, and their fell god was killed by Marika herself. The ancient dragons broke down the walls of Leyndell, but met fierce retaliation. However, I think the House of the Erd Tree encountered the most trouble against the land to their southwest, Liurnia. Here, the House of the Moon repelled their offensives time and time again, and I mean that literally, because there was not just one but two wars fought here, and in both of these, there was no victory for the Golden nor for the Moon. And I suspect it was probably because of these lobsters. These damn things can snipe you from like a mile away, and it's bullshit. Actually, it was probably because of the Carrier Knights, who, according to their weapons, were able to wield sorcerous battle skills, and despite numbering fewer than 20, this power made them a match for even the champions of gold in battle. These enchanted knights were anointed by the Lunar Queen, a young astrologer who went on to establish the House of Carrier as royalty in this land. With her bewitching lunar magic, she won over the Academy of Raya Lucaria, where glintstone sorcery was studied, and united the Carrion royal family and the learned scholars of Raya Lucaria defended their home from the golden aggressors. At the head of this great golden army was Radagon.
Lord Radagon was a great champion, possessed of flowing red locks. He came to these lands at the head of a great golden host when he met Lady Rennala in battle.
These two champions clashed, fell in love, and joined their houses.
Radagon once cleansed himself with celestial dew, repented his territorial aggressions, and swore his love to Rennala. The order of the Erd Tree and the fate of the moon were conjoined, and all the wounds of war forgiven.
You might think it strange that the Greater Will would permit this union, but it's not too odd, all things considered. As with most From Software games, sorcery and faith are just two sides of the same coin, and both of these powers stem from the cosmos. Radagon and Rennala were known to have 3 children together. Lunar Princess Rani, who inherited her mother's propensity for lunar magic, Radahn, who took after his father Radagon and would go on to master gravitational magic, and Rykard, who pioneered new hex sorceries and would go on to feed himself to a great serpent. It follows that at some point after this, Marika began to harbor doubts. Doubts about the Golden Order, that she had had a hand in creating.
In Marika's own words, I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?
And it's at this point that we should talk about Marika's motivations, her character. This is surely going to be one of those huge points of debate in the coming years, but for now, my working theory is that she wanted to discover the truth behind order and the truth behind the greater will, and she believed that bonds had to be broken so that they could be better understood. She believed that there was great meaning to be found in hardship.
Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto eternity.
For Lord Godfrey, his struggle ended at the end of his campaigns. According to his armor, he led the war against the giants, faced the Storm Lord alone, and then there came a moment when his last worthy enemy fell, and it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. In truth, he was robbed of his grace. Then Marika sent him away.
My lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the lands between. Ye will wage war in a land afar, where ye will live and die.
This became known as the Long March of the Tarnished, as Godfrey and his tarnished descendants walked away from the lands between. But Queen Marika absolutely had a plan here, that Lord Godfrey and his descendants would one day return stronger, having struggled outside of grace.
Then,
Alright, I was gonna say, like, why the fuck would she do that? But okay, that mentality, like, through struggle is like, that would forge a more stronger, overall person, I guess. So she hoped that they would come back stronger. Damn, that is something. So she really believed in that theory. That
After
struggle
thy
is
death,
like, yeah.
I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring, grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
Soon after, she found a new husband. Either that or a new husband was found for her.
When Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radagon left Rennala to return to the Erdtree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord. The mystery endures to this day as to why Lord Radagon would cast Lady Rennala aside, and moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord.
why would someone aside? Come on, man. Right? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna be king. Fuck this shit. He just walked to the medical, like, yeah, make me king.
Whatever the case, as a part of this union, Radagon's prior 3 children with Rennala became demigod stepchildren, granted grace thanks to their new family tree. Rennala was broken by this, and so was her country, Liurnia. The Queen's set reads, when Rennala, head of both the Academy of Raya Lucaria and the Carian royal family, lost her husband Radagon, her heart went along with him, and then those at the Academy realized that Rennala was no champion after all. In the wake of Radagon's betrayal and Rennala's poor judgment, Liurnia struggled with civil war, with the Academy of Raya Lucaria on one side and the Carian royals on the other. And it's here, during the age of the Erdtree, that Lunar Princess Rani, daughter of Rennala and Radagon, stole a fragment of the Rune of Death.
It happened during the Golden Age of the Erdtree, long before the shattering of the Elden Ring. Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, the Black Blade.
As mentioned previously, Malekith was Marika's shadow, and he had sealed destined death in a black blade. Then a fragment, only a fragment, of this Rune of Death was stolen. And once this happened, Malekith went a step further in protecting destined death. He bound the blade within his own flesh, such that none might rob death ever again. It was too late, however. This fragment of the Rune of Death was used immediately, that night, to kill a demigod, Marika's own son. Godwyn the Golden.
That was the first recorded death of a demigod in all history, and it became the catalyst. Soon, the Elden Ring was smashed, and thus sprang forth the war known as the Shattering.
Now, there is a lot of really credible evidence that Marika was behind this plot to have a fragment of the Rune of Death stolen. There's also a ton of evidence that Marika is behind the entirety of your Tarnished quest, but we'll talk about that in another video.
Why would
For
she
now,
have her own son killed? Damn, this is some dark shit.
all you really need to know, in terms of the timeline at least, is this. After the marriage of Marika and Radagon, and after a fragment of the Rune of Death was stolen, Marika went on to shatter the Elden Ring, and Radagon attempted to repair it. To no avail. The Elden Ring had been broken into runes, some great and some small.
You know, it's said that Lord Radagon harbored a secret. A famed sculptor of the Erdtree capital was once summoned to render Lord Radagon's likeness in giant stature, when he glimpsed the skeleton in Radagon's closet. And as such, it's said the great statue harbors his secret too.
Of course, the huge twist in Elden Ring is that Radagon is Marika, or depending on what you believe, he became her, for she knew it was going to happen.
In Marika's own words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both. Mine other self.
You can tell when From
Okay.
Software is keeping something a little bit open-ended, and of everything in Elden Ring's lore, this will also go on to be one of the biggest unknowns as we move forward.
Yeah,
For
that's-
example, the wording, thou art yet to become me, reinforces that Marika and Radagon were two separate entities before the Shattering. However, in contrast, there is also evidence that Radagon was always part of Marika. For example, Enya says that
The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika.
but how can this be if Radagon married Rennala and had those demigod children? The only way that makes sense is if Radagon was always Marika and he just went over there to seduce Rennala long ago. I'll present more concrete theories in the future, but
Yeah,
on
that
this
makes
matter,
sense.
the most important thing is, what do you think? While you can figure out a ton of Elden Ring's story, not all of it is open to interpretation. Certain things are, and this is one of them. And
Yeah, I mean, look, every lore has to have some kind of a mystery behind it where the whole base kind of debates it. It's fun. But if you make it like too much like question mark, like people can get frustrated with it. So I don't know where this falls in that category. Is it a fun thing that you speculate, or is it like, holy shit, just give us some clues, like what is the reality? I don't know, man. But this is interesting. Like he said, like if all the demigods are part of Marika, right? Yeah, so that would make sense, like how Radagon is Marika from the start. Otherwise, how those other would be demigods.
interpretation is a big part of what makes this story special. At any rate, the union of Radagon and Marika seems to be a union of two fundamental opposing laws of the Golden Order. We mentioned these laws earlier, actually. There's the law of causality, and Marika is an agent of cause and effect. And there's the law of regression, as Radagon is a character who aspires to be complete and regress together. So I have a theory that forcing these two beings that represent these concepts together would have corrected Marika's deviance. But even so, she was imprisoned in the Erdtree for the crime of the Shattering.
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and the vision's vessel.
The conjoined Radagon and Marika even had two demigod children of their own, Miquella and Malenia. These two children were born afflicted. Miquella was cursed with eternal childhood, and Malenia harbored a horrific rot within. Even so, these two children were both chosen as Empyreans. They were immensely sacred beings and eligible to inherit godhood from the Greater Will. Perhaps the Greater Will was just desperate to find a worthy successor. And indeed, in the Shattering War to come, many would try to claim the shards of the Elden Ring, and they would try to take the throne, including, of course, the Tarnished, who returned from their long march at long last, which we'll talk about in the next main lore video. I should probably also mention here that if you become a patron, you'll see upcoming lore videos early, as that's one of the rewards you get if you pledge to the $3 tier. And if you think my channel really adds a lot of value to the Souls games for you to the point where you pledge $20, then in this new tier you'll receive a new mug.
So her first husband and obviously the people who are kind of banished returned with somewhat power from the Elden Ring, the Shattered Elden Ring.
Every 3 months that has a unique design on it, to do with the games by From Software. There are 4 to collect. The first one you'll get is inspired by Dark Souls, then Elden Ring, then Sekiro, and finally Bloodborne. And they all have fantastic art that I worked on with an amazing artist named Chu. But anyway, I figured this is the right place to end this video because the information here is going to be overwhelming. I bet it probably was too overwhelming, you know? It took me ages to commit these names and the relationships they had with other characters to memory, so I hope you guys are doing alright. One thing that helped me a lot was that we designed an enormous mind map with pretty much all of Elden Ring's lore, all of its item descriptions, all of it.
Just you see, then you only thing you do is scream. Alright. This guy is really good, especially with all the lore channels. I definitely respect this guy because I definitely feel like Elden Rings is one of those games whose lore is not going to be obvious. Like any average gamer who play this game will probably won't even realize it, like not even a small portion of it. So somebody really needs to dig in deep to realize all this deep lore.
Its dialogues, all of the relationships between characters that we can think of. We added all of this together and it helped a ton in learning about the story and visualizing it all. And one day I will make this asset available to you all because I think after doing it, I think this is the quintessential way to piece together the story, and I think giving you guys this asset eventually will make that accessible for people. So I'm really excited about that. I want to thank Absa and Zard for accepting the paid task of helping me put all the raw data into this mind maps.
Yeah, this is just fucking awesome. See, this is why I'm kind of getting pissed off at Bethesda Game Studios. Look at this studio. Like, Bloodborne was not that long ago, right? I mean, considering. And Elden Ring, like, just took few years and they created this kind of a deep fucking lore for it, right? This studio. And Bethesda Game Studios can't make a good lore game anytime soon. They take fucking 10 years. God knows when Elder Scrolls gonna arrive, right? I know they're doing Starfield right now, but if that game's lore sucks, I'm gonna be pissed, right? Like, Bethesda Game Studios is like, 25 years old studio who does this lore and lore game shit, right? Their first proper lore game was, I guess, Morrowind. So that's like 20 years ago, right? So they should know this better, because this Elden Ring is perfect example of, like, in the modern world with the modern mechanics and, I guess, engines, it's really hard to make a good lore game. Yeah, bullshit. Look at this. Look at the Elden Ring. Right? I'm so glad this game came out, because anytime somebody just bullshits, like in the modern world, it's hard to do. Look at the Elden Ring. How did they do it then? So this is really good. Elden Ring is just perfection from all sides, right? This game is going to be one of those games that people are going to measure with it, right? With other games. Like, look at this shit, how greatly this is done. Alright, well, that was Elden Ring's lore by the channel VaatiVidya. If you like my content, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to do more videos like, demigods from this channel, comment down, I guess. And yeah, I'll see you next time.